up and I thought, you know what? I really want to visit the wife upstairs. You can see that I've made my coffee in my Emily Jane Bronte No Coward Soul is Mine. And I thought that I would start this one-sit read right here at my Bronte shelf, or the Bronte area of my shelf. There's some Dickens over here too. And this is a photo of me outside the parsonage, and would you just look at the joy on my face. Having first arrived there for the first time in my life, it was amazing. You can see I have all of these books by and about the Brontes, also some fun retellings of their work. I have some more up here. Don't want to get you too sick, but all that to show you that I've read a lot of books by and about the Brontes. That's not all of them. In my most recent move, I unhauled about 12 that I owned. And then, you know, libraries have a whole lot of books. So I've read hundreds of books about the Brontes from the time that I fell in love with them in my middle school years till today. And so I enter Rachel Hawkins' world, The Wife Upstairs, with a bit of trepidation, just wondering about the comments that I've heard from people about it. So let's go sit down on the couch and flip this camera around and talk a bit about that before we start to read. Hi, so here we are on the couch, and I have my copy of The Wife Upstairs, and I'm going to attempt to do a one-sit read of this. As I said over at the bookshelf, I am a little bit trepidatious about reading this book. I always am a little bit trepidatious about reading retellings of Jane Eyre. So many of them I just find awful. So we'll see how this one goes. I mean, I find them awful, but I still can't stop reading them. So yeah, we're gonna see how this one goes. Yeah, it'll be chapter by chapter and check in after every chapter, just like always. And I'll see you in a couple minutes after I read that first chapter. Okay, so chapter 1 done. It starts out on a cold, rainy day, of course. It starts out in Jane's voice. And I don't want to give spoilers because I think that half the fun of this book is going to be reading it without spoilers, but thinking you know because it's Jane Eyre. It is very clearly meant to be in your face, a retelling of Jane Eyre. I won't read the first line, but the first line mimics the first line of Jane Eyre. So far, I mean, there are a lot of huge differences, character-wise, setting-wise. Of course, it's modernizing things. I like how Mrs. Reed has been modernized. I think it's a great, pretty accurate modernization, pretty true to Mrs. Reed so far, to the essence of a Mrs. Reed. Jane, however, the biggest difference in my mind, I mean, again, this is a different story, same characters, same setting, seems to be similar thrust of action or plot. The biggest difference is that upon reading the first chapter of Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, you're in love with and rooting for Jane from the very beginning. And in reading the first chapter of The Woman Upstairs, Jane leaves a bad taste in your mouth from the very beginning. I don't like her. I don't like her at all. And it's not just because she's not my Jane, it's because I don't think you're meant to like her. Chapter 2 down. It was very short. You skip some of the most important character development stuff that's in Jane Eyre. In this book, it goes straight from the beginning to a significant moment. Yeah, I don't know that I am so excited about a Jane I don't like, an Edward Rochester named Eddie. And the level of cynicism that's just kind of built into this story so far. But I'm only 2 chapters in, trying to keep an open mind, trying not to be as cynical about it as it is about the world. So I am going back in for chapter 3. Not liking it so far, though. Chapter 3 done. It's a lot of dialogue, and it just feels kind of awkward and cringy. Yeah, not loving it. Not loving it. Not only not loving it because it's not true to Jane Eyre. I mean, I going into it, I knew it wouldn't be true to Jane Eyre. But not loving it because I don't like the characters so far, and this seems to be about the only amount of development we're going to get because we're going straight into plot right now. And I just really don't like this Jane girl. I don't like her. Even if this was not a retelling of Jane Eyre, if this was a standalone novel, like I knew nothing about it, I would be totally turned off by this character. So, yeah, I move on. I go to chapter 4. So chapter 4 is down, and it's a retelling of a retelling. So suddenly we've got Rebecca themes in here, and yes, Rebecca is a very loose retelling of, or revisiting of, Jane Eyre. And so you've got like straight up Jane Eyre retelling, and now you've got infused Rebecca retellings. And, you know, I love Ruth Ware. I love her. I know she's a little bit polarizing, like you either love her or you hate her. And I love Ruth Ware because she captures the feelings and the essences of other writers, famous writers, work, and yet tells a completely unique story. Like she knows how long to keep the story the same before breaking off completely. She knows how to hook you in and slowly alter your perception of how the story should go or how the characters should be. This book immediately like picks up your favorite toy and breaks it in half in front of you. Again, I just really don't like this Jane. I'm going to give one spoiler here. Spoiler. If you don't want to hear this, turn the TV down. This Jane is a kleptomaniac or a thief. I mean, she's constantly talking about wanting to steal things, and she's stolen a ring, and now she's stolen a silver dog tag. Jane Eyre would not do that. She would not do that. There's no way. And I understand, like, there's the whole orphan thing, and this Jane has been in foster care, grew up in foster care. That doesn't necessarily immediately mean that you are a thief or that you are so cynical about everyone and everything, or that you're full of hatred. I mean, I don't like this Jane. I don't like her. I don't like her at all. And I don't like this author trying to do a retelling of both Jane Eyre and Rebecca, which is already a retelling. I think it's too much. I don't think she can pull it off, but we'll see. We'll see. I'm not even talking about the Berthas and the Blanches and the Eddies. I feel like Rachel Hawkins doesn't actually know these characters. And if she does, and I know that's just my feeling, that's just my perception, but if she does really know them, which she very well might, why does she hate them so much? Because she's really, really like, bleh. And I don't really have words. I just have disappointment. And annoyance. So, moving on to chapter 5. So in that chapter, we meet St. John, and he's a gross Baptist youth pastor, and he's really vile and disgusting, which, again,
not what this character is. I think what this book is missing is light, is grace, is the miraculous part of Jane Eyre. There's a lot of dark, awful grit and unfair happenings. There's a lot of like real life in Jane Eyre, but it's all tempered by this balance of things working out, of there being kindness, of there being gentleness, of there being light, of there being this kind of magical realism. And this is nothing but the dark. And even things that are light, like just naturally in the book that aren't like magical realism or special or divine intervention or whatever, even those things are stripped away and made dirty. I really don't like this book. I really don't like it. It still has plenty of time to change my mind, but it's not looking good for this book and me. It's not. And I shudder to think that somebody would pick this book up and read it and think, now I know the story of Jane Eyre. Really. It's bad. All right, just finished that chapter. That was chapter 6, and now I am on page 31. Chapters are very short, so I might start reading 2 and then checking in. There's not a single character in this book that I am rooting for. Not one. Not one character in this book is set up to be rooted for. I hate them all. They are all gross. Chapter 7. Chapters 7 and 8 down, and yeah. I keep asking myself if I can just remove the idea that this is a retelling of Jane Eyre, if that will help me enjoy this a little bit more. I don't think I can, because it's very blatant. But even if I did try to see it through a non-related to Jane Eyre lens, this wouldn't be a book I would read. It's just dark and gross, and it doesn't have to be. It's just like slimy, and it doesn't have to be. There are plenty of thrillers out there that don't read like this. Just not the book for me, I don't think. But yeah, so I'm going to read chapters 9 and 10, and then I'll check back in. All right, I've gotten to part 2 now. So part 1 was called Jane, part 2 is called B. B is Bertha. The Jane in this book is cold, calculated, manipulative, and cynical. Let's find out who Bertha is. Okay, so I finished part 2, which wasn't very long, and now part 3 is called Jane again, and not again, it's just called Jane, but part 1 was also called Jane, and I'm about to read through that one. I'll probably read that whole part and then check in. There's not much to say from chapter to chapter unless I am looking to give spoilers, and I'm not. Just reactions. And my reaction is pretty steady for every chapter. I just get more and more annoyed. I just feel this book is completely unnecessary. It's not adding anything to the world right now. It still has about 200 pages to change my mind. And I'm willing to let it change my mind. Okay, let's go back to the very first one-sit read I did, which was a Riley Sager, and I have big problems with Riley Sager. Ended up totally changing my mind about that book through the process of the one-sit read. Absolutely loved it by the end. So I'm totally willing for this book to be that kind of experience. Right now, it's just not. Right now, I am not enjoying it at all. At all. I continue to read fueled only by my dislike of it. And I'm not trying to offend anybody. If anybody has read this and is like, this is the best book ever, and I'm sure there are people out there that feel that way, this is just not the best book ever. It's just not. It's just not good. It's average writing. It's not bad writing. It's not bad writing. We all know how I feel about bad writing. And it's not bad, but it's not good. The dialogue has gotten a little less awkward, a little more natural, but only slightly. There is no magical realism. There is no grace. There is nothing merciful about this story. All the things that make Jane Eyre a lovable, engrossing read have been stripped from this book. All the mystery that makes Rebecca a tantalizing, engrossing read has been stripped from this book. You know the beginning from the end, if you're unless you're completely unfamiliar with these books. If you are completely unfamiliar with these books, then you're just reading this as a thriller, like a Gone Girl or Girl on the Train, more like Girl on the Train. And it's not even a good example of that kind of book. I think that if I didn't know the stories that this story is trying to retell and reframe, if I just thought this was a thriller, I would feel this was even more mediocre than what I'm actually understanding it to be. I'm not having a great experience with it, and I'm sad about that. And I am a little bit surprised, but not super surprised. Even when I do a read of a retelling that I end up really disliking in the end, for example, Jane Steele, the book itself almost always has something, it has some quality that makes it unique and feels like, yes, I can see this was necessary, or yes, I can see how this adds to the never-ending story through time of Charlotte Bronte and Jane Eyre. I'm not finding that in this book so far. So far, this book feels completely and utterly superfluous, and like this did not need to be told. And like this author is capitalizing on Daphne du Maurier and Charlotte Bronte. And I just don't like it. I don't like it. So I'm going to keep going, though. I'll see you at the end of part 3. All right, so just finished part 3. I'm about to read part 4. It is called B. I still struggled to comprehend why this novel was written. What is the purpose? What is this adding? It's not a great standalone, even if you take away its connections to Jane Eyre and Rebecca. It's just a mediocre thriller, if that's how you want to read it. And it is not adding anything to the Charlotte Bronte or the Daphne du Maurier legacy. So I really don't understand why this book exists. It is published by St. Martin's Press. I just wonder what they saw in it besides money. And that really, I mean, I understand they're a business, but that really just bums me out. I imagine that, come on, Jujus, you gonna eat that cookie? I imagine that the author has a deep connection to this story. I don't think anybody goes into anything Bronte related. I don't think anybody stays in anything Bronte related half-heartedly, but this feels disrespectful, and it feels hollow, and it feels colorless, I guess. I don't know. It's not going well. I am diving into the next section, and we'll see how that goes. Yeah, the next section is B. It'll probably be fairly short. So when that section is, or when that part, they're calling it, is done, I will check in again. Before I do that, I forgot I have a prediction. Spoilers. If you don't want spoilers, walk away. You, walk away. Okay, so spoilers, prediction. They're setting it up for the reader to believe that Edward, killed his wife's, Bertha B., killed his wife's best friend, Blanche Ingram, on a boat, and then locked Bertha B. up in a safe room that they had incorporated into their house a year or so ago. My prediction is that B killed Blanche and Eddie locked her in the safe room to protect her from consequences because she's not all there. This is my prediction. There's nothing in here there's nothing that makes you think that she's not of sound mind. There is a little hint about disagreements or jealousies between her and Blanche, but there's nothing really to set that up. I have come up with that prediction based only upon my sitting here thinking, what would this author think is a clever twist? And that's where I think it is. It's very simple. It's very obvious way to go, and that's the one that I am going to stick with. That's my prediction. I don't understand why all of the women in this book are so conniving and manipulative. I don't understand why everything is so hateful in this story. It's so, I hesitate to use the word dark because I like reading dark things. I like sinister. But this isn't sinister. This is just like an episode of Dateline. I'm not invested in anything I'm reading in this. And I'm not rooting, not even for B. I'm not rooting for a single one of these characters. Not one. There's not a single character that feels like I want them to win. You know, whatever winning looks like. I don't care what happens to them, but not only do I not care what happens to them, I think they all deserve terrible endings. It takes a special kind of writing to get me to feel this way. So, there's no redeemable quality. All right, starting the next section. It's called Jane. Another part read, another part hated. Moving on to the next one, which is called B. Just finished chapter 26. I've read, it's not a section, but the B section was very short, so I started the next Jane section, and this just felt like a good stopping point for a check-in. Nothing about what Rachel Hawkins has done with this story honors the story of Jane Eyre in any way. And I'm going back to that word that I've used already, disrespectful. It's disrespectful. Like, I think the assumption when entering into a retelling is that the author has done a retelling for one of two reasons. One, because they love the original story so much that it has inspired them to try and fanfic it, like fan fiction, like to keep going. Even if they change everything, there's still a desire to preserve the heart of the purpose of the story, the message of the story. The other reason that authors might choose to do a retelling is because they see the need to correct what the original story or author did. They disagree so heartily, they feel so passionately about how wrong this story got something, or this author got something, that they want to take it into their own hands and remold it and reshape it into something that improves upon it. This book degrades the original story. It is degrading. I feel very strongly about this. This book is a slap in the face of Charlotte Bronte. Less so Daphne du Maurier because she's just taken one plot point from that book and clearly just planted it in the middle of this one. There is no way that this book can redeem itself at this point. But I have less than 100 pages left. So I'm going to see it through to the end. I'm going to check in when I'm done reading. It's 12:30 now. I've been with this book since about 8:45, 9 o'clock this morning. Really, really, really do not recommend this book. I don't recommend it if you like thrillers and don't know Jane Eyre, because it's not a good thriller. And I don't recommend it if you love Jane Eyre, because it's not in any way going to soothe your Jane Eyre loving heart. So, yeah, I don't recommend this book. Part 9, and it's called Jane, and I am about 50 pages to the end, and feel the exact same way as I have felt from the very beginning. Just a descent into disappointedness and a descent into the question of what exactly does this add to the legacy? What exactly does this offer the thriller genre? And I see nothing. Oh, how I hate this book, considering giving it 0 stars. 0. This book is worse than a waste of time, because it is going to be read by people who think that they will be able to understand Jane Eyre through this book, think that a modern retelling will somehow hold the essence of the original story, when this book is a degradation of the very essence of Jane Eyre. Yes, Joey, my dog came over. He can sense how angry I am at this book. Yes. He's like, Jenna, can you just chill out? No, I can't. This book is an abomination. It's an abomination. And also, another spoiler, or yeah, there will be spoilers here. My prediction about the simple, most obvious way that this author would think that they could make a clever twist is correct. Gah! It's not even a good thriller. Yeah, okay. This book. Gah! So Rachel Hawkins reveals that she does know something about the Brontes, because she gives Jane in this book a last name finally on the third to last page. And that last name is Bell, which, if you are a Bronteophile, you will understand that this is a very significant name, because the Brontes published their first books under the pseudonyms of Cure, Ellis, and Acton Bell. So she gives a little nod to the Brontes there. Too little, too late. Too little, too late, and in fact, bigger slap in the face, because it just shows that if you do understand this story, and you do understand the Brontes, and you do understand the legacy that this book comes from, and the responsibility you take when you go to retell this story, and you do this to it, that's just unforgivable. It's unforgivable. I will never read anything else that Rachel Hawkins writes. And I know she doesn't care. I'm one person. I hate this book. Hate it. Hate this book. Okay, I've finished it now. And I want to read from her acknowledgments. She says, and lastly, thanks to every woman who ever got to the end of Jane Eyre and thought, honestly, Jane, you could do better. You are my people, and I love you. She has no clue what Jane Eyre is actually about. She has no clue. I'm livid. I'm actually livid. And my dog knows how upset I am, because he's freaking out. It's okay, Joey. It's just a book. It's just a book. But I'm kind of speechless. I'm kind of speechless about how incredibly disrespectful this book was I've read some bad retellings in my time. This purposefully went out of its way to completely and utterly destroy this story, these characters. What on earth possessed this woman to ruin this story to such an extent? I am so disgusted by this book. Please do not read this book. Additionally, I'm going to put up a picture right here of my favorite comment. I'm not looking at it right now, and I'm just going based on memory, but it's something like, Charlotte Bronte, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Because that is how I feel. Someone misread you and then tore the heart out of your story and then defamed every character in your story and then created some kind of imaginary Bonnie and Clyde ending for the two individuals that she made the instigators of all the pain in your story, and called that better than a woman writing a story about a woman who doesn't let circumstance control her future or her choices. Rachel Hawkins, I'm ashamed of what you've done. None of this like, oh, I know that writers work really hard on things. No. You purposefully set out to tear this down, and you don't even know what you're tearing down. You'll never see this video. If you do, I'll be really surprised. But if I can stop one person from reading this book, then I will have done my job. Do not read this book. It's atrocious. And that ends our happy one-sit read. I need to go do something else right now. I want an apology. I wanted to write an apology to the Bronte estate. That was disgusting. Thus ends my tirade.